Arkansas and Louisiana. This is the fourth part of our 8-part series on inclusive financing. Today we're going to be discussing the decision tool for utility managers. As a reminder, this is a series that is really meant to take folks beyond the 101 level. Everybody on the call today has joined the prior sessions or has listened to the recordings of the prior sessions to get all the grounding they need in on-bill financing. And are currently working to identify an application for tariffed on-bill financing in their community. Now, these sessions, including the one today, are meant to support more direct dialogue with our professionals and consultants and people with experience in the field to help you address your specific questions about how you're implementing your program or any specific challenges you've come across. So I highly encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity. And we've got some great folks on the line today who are going to help us with that. One thing I want to highlight, in addition to our session today, we're also still offering office hours. It's an added benefit we've decided to make available to our Learning Circle participants. We had a great first run. A couple of weeks ago, we did a session after our third part of the series where we invited folks to just dial in with their questions and ask Holmes Hummel any kind of direct implementation issues they were experiencing in the field, or how any of the content that we went over in the prior session would directly relate to them or get any clarifying points. We're going to be doing that again. We're going to offer an hour of direct outreach time with Dr. Hummel from 1 to 2 o'clock next Friday, April 28th. Certainly encourage everybody to call in, and you can get some direct one-on-one consultation. If you have other questions or things you want to kind of tee up before that session, you're welcome to email those things directly to me so I can get it to Dr. Hummel. We can kind of prepare any content or materials to make sure we can make the best use of your time while you're with us. Now, today we are happy to be joined. Dr. Hummel is going to be taking us through the decision tool, but we're also very fortunate to be joined by Mr. Mark Casey. He's the CEO of Ouachita Electric Cooperative in Arkansas. For many who have heard of Mr. Casey before, he has been, the work they've been doing out in Ouachita has been well featured across the region. She has been very honored to have them participate in our annual conference last year, highlighting all the excellent work they're doing through on-bill financing out in Ouachita. And I'll invite Mr. Casey if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Ouachita.
Well, thank you. Again, this is Mark Casey, and I'm the general manager for Ouachita Electric Co-op. We're a small rural electric co-op in South Arkansas. We serve approximately 9,400 meters and with about 7,000 members. And we've been working with SEIA for several years. We first started out doing a loan program, and SEIA was instrumental in that, and working with our state energy office and making some of that possible. And our work continued with them as we have gone through the tariff and helping us work with DOE on getting a grant that's helping us to try to bring this same efficiency program to other cooperatives in Arkansas. And so it's been a great relationship there. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, thank you. We're always, it's been a terrific partnership on our end, and we look forward to working with you in the future. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Holmes Hummel, who's going to take over the presentation from here and walk us through the series.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Wesley, and thank you to everyone at SEIA for supporting the series. Wesley, I've just clicked on my arrow key without a response on the screen, and I'm not going to take that personally, but I'm going to ask you to advance the slide for us. My computer may not like me today. Go ahead and click it open so that we'll see here the 3 answers for why utility managers are getting a special installment in the Learning Circle series. And the reason is that they are the central decision makers about investments that utilities make. They're responsible for the capital allocation recommendations to their board members. And once the board approves them as recommendations, they still then sometimes have to go get more approvals from regulators. And then even after regulators approve them, they need to go and explain those to advocates and members of the public who want to cross-examine them. And so managers tend to want to have a high degree of confidence in the decisions they're making before they make them. And utility managers have historically been risk-averse as a culture and a community, even while making decisions that have very high consequence. Utility managers, as a result, have a lot of questions. So whether you are a utility manager today on the series with us, or you're someone who's engaged with and talking to utility managers, you can expect them to want to have a lot more information so that they have the full confidence they want in order to make a decision, make a recommendation to people who would be decision makers like members of their board or a regulatory entity. They also, even after they've made that decision, need to make sure that their investment portfolio is well managed and that the performance of their investments are validating those decisions. And we'll talk about some of the things that they can do to reduce their risk of having a performance that would deviate from the kind that we've seen in prior sessions that have been quite favorable. Wesley, I've regained control, so I'm going to tap forward myself. And now on the screen, you see the cover page from the decision tool for utility managers. It's a document that was linked in the announcement for this session. If you don't have this PDF, you can find it by just typing decision tool for utility managers into Google. It's the #1 return. And that document is a product of a federal investment in a how-to guide for utility managers everywhere based on the experience of Roanoke Electric, which proposed this project to the Rural Business Service of the Rural Development Administration, saying, you know what, we've learned so much in our process of thinking about whether or not to offer debt-based financing or tariff-based financing to our customers, that now that we've made the decision, we want to eliminate the cost of professional services that other utility managers would otherwise have to bear to go out and get expertise to help them understand the deliberation that they would need to undertake. We're just going to write it down and let people download it at no cost in order to eliminate that as part of the transaction cost of getting started. And the Energy Efficiency Institute, creators of the pay-as-you-save system, which has been introduced in prior series, was their primary consultant and author for the project. So the presentation today is a nickel tour of this document, and you may have already seen it. Wesley, tap me forward again, if you don't mind. We're going to follow the session. Wait a second. There we go. All right. We are going to follow the same structure of the decision tool for utility managers by basically presenting it in the same two parts that it's written in. One is, first, the utility manager has to decide whether or not to offer a tariffed on-bill program at all. Decide whether it's a good fit for them versus anything else they could do, including doing nothing. And then if they've decided that a tariffed on-bill program will help advance the strategic priorities of their management team, their stakeholders, their shareholders, their regulators' interests, then they need to decide how they will implement it and whether or not a standard implementation program that's available off the shelf will work for them, or whether they are a utility with special conditions or special circumstances that would require more bespoke or custom or tailored professional services. So we'll start with the first question, and moving through. Wesley, I'm still in dysphoria about who's controlling our slides, so I'm counting on you. All right. On prior sessions, we have already described the types of financing in the field to be third-party loans that are made by credit unions or banks that use a utility's billing services to collect the debts. And that is called on-bill repayment. If the utility itself starts making the loans, then it's an on-bill loan program where the utility is the creditor that's making the loans. And The third option, the tariff on-bill program, is a more inclusive version that eliminates the debt obligation and therefore the underwriting requirements and allows all people to participate regardless of their income or their credit score. Now, the first of those three options looks like a transaction that's illustrated here, where the capital flows to the customer and then back through the utility. The next one after that shows the variation where it's almost exactly identical, except for the capital is flowing through the utility instead of the customer having a direct relationship with the bank. They're getting a relationship with the utility. And some utilities really do like this. They do want to have this customer relationship where they're providing the service. But some utilities really do not like this because they perceive that it puts them in the position of being a bank. And they don't want to be a bank and also present themselves in a position where they would be subject to regulation for offering bank products. They're already subject to utility regulation. Some would say we don't want to be subject to financial sector regulations as well. Well, the loan-based programs, whether it's on-bill repayment or on-bill lending, have characteristics that involve or really framed by the loan as a legal instrument. And that stands in contrast to the tariffed on-bill programs that have been in the Southeast based on pay-as-you-save. And here you see a side-by-side that will be familiar to people who've been to all of the sessions to date that give you a sense that a utility manager really does have a contrast in options. Here's where I'll ask Mark Casey to speak to his interest as a CEO when he saw a side-by-side like this, because these are actually his two programs. Ouachita Electric did offer the home energy lending program for more than a year before it switched to the more inclusive tariff on-bill terms of the Help Pays program. But it was Mark Casey who had to recommend to his board what to do. And I'd like it, Mark, if you would mind giving us some of your sense of that deliberation.
No, thank you. We had been doing on-bill loans, excuse me, for over a year. We started what we call the HELP program because we wanted to offer a service to our members that would improve their homes. We'd been involved in energy efficiency for years, but really kind of on the sidelines. And we'd go out and do energy audits, and we would make recommendations, and that was our involvement. And the actual work never really got done because the problem was that individual members didn't have the resources to actually implement the recommendations that we had given them. And this was working well with the loan, and we were getting quite a bit of participation with the loan, but we were limited. We were only working with homeowners, people that own their own home. And we were only doing basic weatherization, which was insulation, air sealing, and duct sealing. And we had been discussing on how to increase that, to go to a larger loan to include HVAC, because I knew HVAC is where, especially in our part of the world, air conditioning system is a necessity, but it's also the major part of anyone's electric bill. And the benefits of higher efficiency are quite obvious when you look at air conditioning. When we first heard about the tariff program, and we started to make inquiries, and we're finding out how the tariff would work, we were very interested because the tariff actually took a lot of the risk away from us. When we made a loan, as Holmes mentioned, we were the bank. And if someone decided not to pay the loan, we didn't have a lot of recourse other than having a lien, and if they ever sold the house, that we could collect at that time. Fortunately, we never got into that situation because the people were generally so satisfied with having the work done that we did not have any collection problems on the loan. But that was limited to the air conditioning, duct sealing, and and caulking, essentially. Well, when we found out about the tariff, because I knew like I say, the bulk of the savings would come from heating and air, and the fact that we would be making the investment, and the tariff is based on the location, not on the individual, and allowing us to go out and make an assessment of the property, decide that the property was structurally sufficient that we could invest in the property. Of course, we had to take this idea to our state utility commission, and we presented to them, and they were intrigued by the idea themselves, because actually we took it to the commission. They didn't. It wasn't a program they came and asked that we implement. We were requesting permission to do it, and once that approval was granted, which was a key thing, getting that granted as a tariff, because I've been in this business approaching 40 years, and everything we do as an electric company is financed through tariffs. Any type of construction, anything we do is recovered through tariffs. And by having the energy efficiency program on a tariff model, it gets treated just like any other service that we provide. And the commission was specific on that in their ruling, that it's an essential part of our service, no different than building or maintaining lines. The other part of that is that it gave us the authority that if we made an investment in a property and the property owner did not, or the renter did not make their payments on their electric bill, because it's an essential part of service, we would do what we normally do when someone does not pay their electric bill, and that was disconnect their service. This proves to be an effective tool of getting people reconnected. The tariff gave us the ability to suspend collection if someone moves away and the property is vacant. And as soon as it gets reoccupied, we start collecting our investment back and recovering our investment. But having the tariff, because we were only doing homeowners, it was somewhat limited into what we could do. And this, the people that really needed it, a large number, were not homeowners. They rent their property, and then we're in a rural area, so we don't have a lot of apartments, but we did have a couple of apartment complexes, and most of the residents of those complexes were somewhat income limited, and the tariff gave them the ability that if the property needed improvements and they were a member of the cooperative, that they were qualified for the program. And because it was a tariff, there was no credit check, there's no income requirements, and they were able to be qualified. Well, this was approved actually last February by the Arkansas Commission. It took us till about the 1st of April to actually change from our loan program to using the tariff program and start operating. And again, when I say we have 7,000 meters, we probably only have about 5,000 permanent residences. A lot of those meters are not homes. They're people's barns, water wells, not places where people actually live. Essentially, we have two rates. We have residential and non-residential rates. But just in the last 8 months of 2016, we were able to improve almost 300 homes, which is a significant percentage of our membership, and the amount of savings we were able to achieve was tremendous. And one of those projects, go ahead.
Mark, let me invite you to share more about the results when we get to the part of the utility manager's decision tool that's focused on implementation, because you've turned the corner here from regulatory approval to implementation, and in the second half, that's when we'll get there.
Okay, thank you. But like I said, getting that approval was a key point, and making that a part of all of our other services that we provide. And the other part that made that such an important feature was that as a tariff, it gave our lenders great confidence to loan us money, because just as we borrow money to build electric lines, to do maintenance, we would borrow money, and we are using that money then to provide energy efficiency tools for our members. And that gave the banks a great deal of confidence. And the other part that was a big part of the decision, when we make a loan, like I say, if someone didn't pay, we're left holding that and are responsible for getting it paid back. Well, the tariff allows things to be ongoing, and even through different members, because we're investing in the property and not the individual. Well, that took a lot of the risk out of what we were doing, and allowed us to invest more and to help more types of homes. If you've been in the utility business, I know in our circumstances, the uncollectible accounts that we have, the vast majority of them are uncollectible because we can no longer find the individuals. They leave town, change names, or take service in another area. But when you're invested in the property does not leave. And overall, our uncollectible rate is quite low. I think we're at about 0.27% of that, and that's just overall bad debt. But with the tariff, I think we even have less risk than that, because the locations do not leave. And being able to recover from those locations, even though the meter, the name may change, was a valuable tool for us. And it allowed our board to have much more confidence in what we were doing, and especially because we were going to be investing larger sums of money. And at this point,
Mark, thank you. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that you've given us a clear view of some of your deliberations as a utility manager. We're going to come back to ask you a similar question in the latter part of this opening half of the guide, decision tool for utility managers, where you've just voiced over some of the key decisions that you were making as you were deciding the benefits and considerations of adopting a tariff on-bill system. On the screen here, I've basically illustrated how the utility can deploy its capital and recover it without depending on the creditworthiness of a customer, and therefore being able to actually serve more customers. What I haven't shown in this simple example, which we've seen in previous sessions, is how the solution providers break out to include a program operator. It's important to me to show this slide with the illustration that shows the utility's relationship to a program operator that then works with the local contractors who deliver the solutions, because we're going to talk about program operators later in the session, and also the entire next series session is based on the role of a program operator. So one of the utility's deliberations might be, wow, I don't know if I can offer this tariff on-bill program because I don't know if I would be able to implement it. We're going to turn attention to implementation in the latter half of this discussion, but showing you the difference between the system with a program operator and without it, I was without it first and now with it, is important. So when a utility is thinking about how it's going to work, it's not just the program operator and the utility's own staff that they're considering. They're also thinking about their local workforce. What kind of Building Performance Institute certified contractors are in our area? And what kind of source of capital would we be able to draw upon? So Mark has already described how he was thinking about reaching out to customers that were underserved, and we'll hear later about how he's worked with a program operator in his area to move forward with implementation. But every utility that's about to offer a tariff on-bill program would want to first consider who would be in their cast of characters for going forward, and ask themselves if there would be any other research they would want to do about exploring different capital providers or making sure they have training programs in the area so that more people can be qualified for the jobs they create. The utility itself has key roles that would need to perform. Outreach to customers is something that utilities are typically quite comfortable with, and cooperatives in particular pride themselves on excellent outreach and engagement with their customers. They might be less familiar with overseeing a program that, instead of building one large substation for multi-million dollars, is investing multi-million dollars in many specific investments at many different sites. So getting familiar with the program oversight roles and the financial management roles for a portfolio that's highly diversified, instead of financing, again, just one large expensive installation, many smaller installations, which by its nature is less risk, has exposure to less risk, but still is a different type of management approach. And finally, the role of the utility in even making the tariff available, which essentially involves going to the commission, or to, in the case where they're not subject to oversight from a commission, the case in which they are just recommending it to their board. So here you see on the screen the two-page tariff for an on-bill energy efficiency program, just as it had been sought by Washington Electric. The regulatory considerations by the commission should be anticipated by the utility, so no utility manager wants to file paperwork with the commission and have the commission come back to them talking to them about topics they haven't thought about themselves. So it's always a good idea for the utility manager to consider what their disconnection for non-payment policies are, and whether they adequately protect vulnerable populations like elderly people who have medical conditions, whether they take into account extreme weather conditions and things like that. Many of them do. That is not a new conversation for most utility managers. You just want to check. And they also want to be able to think about tying their investments to the meter, and whether or not there's any precedent for that, whether their business operations support it, whether billing systems are compatible with it. For most utility billing systems that are used by electric cooperatives, we've checked into both the main vendors, and that's not a problem. And they want to, most utility managers, be very clear about how successor customers at a site would come to find out about the utility's investment. Utilities upgraded the site. The utility bill for the next customer is going to be lower than it would have otherwise been. But how does that next customer come to find out that information? When do they learn about the utility's investment in their site? So walking through that process of disclosures usually important to utility managers, and they want to be thinking about all three of those things before they walk into a conversation with a commission. Now, before we go any further, I want to ask Mark if he would expand on any aspect of his own deliberation that would go into further detail or add to what a utility manager might be considering. Everything that we've talked about so far is included in the first half of the utility manager's decision tool that we talked about at the outset of the session.
No, I'll be happy to comment. I think anyone in the electric business, which has been our history, is a very conservative management team, whether it's the management or the board. And the risk of making loans was a concern, and particularly as we had more people participating in the program, the amount of money we had out on loan continued to grow. And being able to mitigate that with the tariff was a great relief to me, but it was also a big selling point to our board because this became part of our normal operations. It wasn't a separate program. The financing, everything was taken care of as normal. We do comply with all the weather-related connect and disconnect issues. We cannot disconnect when it's below freezing. We cannot disconnect elderly customers when the temperature is going to be over 100, and we still follow all those guidelines. Nothing has changed. but being able to take the risk out of what we were doing, while at the same time having access to greater financing, were just big parts of our decision. And we were not an RUS borrower. We happened to be just a 100% CFC borrower. But CFC was completely supportive of the tariff, and like I say, that they treat it just like if we were building a new distribution line. We're taking care of new customers and actually lowering the load on our system. And I guess one of the goals, and I want to mention that here too, because we are a summer peaking utility, and we do pay a premium for our summer peak. And so everything that we were doing with weatherization, and now that we have the tariff with HVAC systems, is designed to reduce our summer peak. And the tariff made greater savings on our summer peak possible. And lowering that peak demand gives us an ongoing recovery of our investments. And I'll turn that back over to you, Holmes.
Mark, thank you. I'm noting that we are right at the half hour, and there are just 4 slides that remain for the latter part of the decision tool for utility managers. And then we turn it over to everyone in the learning series who's joined us. So you all are now on notice that it's about to be your turn to invite Mark to go into any greater detail based on his experience at the CEO level, and to the extent that I might be able to offer additional insight from multiple utility managers in multiple states, I'll offer additional insight. But this time is yours. We are here because of your interest, and we're introducing you to a tool that already has dramatically reduced the costs of professional services and expert consulting that utility managers might have to otherwise retain in order to go through a process of deliberation that would raise the confidence of their decision makers. And at this point, we've traced the utility manager's line of deliberation to the point where they've decided they want to move forward with the tariff on-bill program, but they still need to answer some practical questions about how it is they're actually going to get the job done, how it will actually be implemented. And particularly, there's a binary fork in the road question at the outset, which is, do I make one up from scratch or do I buy one off the shelf? That's a very simplified frame on the make or buy decision that a lot of people face for lots of different types of questions in life. But the kinds of things that the utility would need to take responsibility for in the make or buy decision is whether or not to make a program designed to implement the tariff or buy one that has been developed and used by other utilities. In order to understand how their utility's business case might be affected, it's important to point out that the financial analysis for their business case has to reflect whether or not they intend to use a program design that already has field results, or to use a program design for which there are no field results because nobody's ever tried their design before. That is a very significant point. So during the deliberative process, the financial analysis that a board or a regulator might need to see needs to make a series of assumptions. The assumptions need to be well-founded. If the assumptions that need to be well-founded are based on a program design that is different than the one that the program manager, utility manager, is expecting to implement, then those assumptions may not be valid. So it's incredibly important for the utility manager to think about whether or not the assumptions for the financial analysis of the program is based on a program design that has field experience or does not, and they need something different that doesn't have field experience, and therefore they need to substantiate the assumptions about their expectations of the program with some other basis. The third consideration for make or buy for utility is presented in the utility manager's decision tool guidelines. So for those of you who've gone and surfed it up online, you've got the PDF and you're scrolling down, you'll scroll down and you'll see the section on generic implementation plans. The utility manager wants to be able to think about that and think to themselves, is my plan going to be different in any significant and substantial way? Is it going to be at step 12 that we diverge? Is there any part of this generic implementation, step by step, where we would have to be different and therefore we would not be able to use a standard implementation plan? Now, for those three considerations, the first of the three being the program design considerations, we can go into more detail here. I'm just showing you the categories. If you download the document, you'll be able to go through it paragraph by paragraph. But a utility manager would want to be asking their project manager, the person that they've tasked to do the due diligence, to check all these boxes. Have you thought about our target market? Have you thought about how much energy efficiency resources we might be able to develop? Have you thought about how much investment we might make each year? Have you thought about how much that might be worth to us? And have you thought about what we would need to do to start the program, which would be different than how much money we would need to anticipate deploying as the program operations go on? So if you were a utility manager, you'd want to know that the person in your organization that's going to be responsible for this project has these kinds of answers. And in Ouachita Electric's case, they went through a deliberative process that included understanding what their expectations were based on a financial analysis. They got their financial analysis by requesting it from Meister Consultant Group. And Mark, I'm going to ask you here to speak to your experience in getting answers to the comparative financial analysis of your loan-based program versus your tariff-based program, and the analysis that you paid for with Meister Consultants Group's support, and then took that to your board.
Sure. And first of all, I just want to say, we are a pretty small cooperative. We have 37 full-time employees, and we still have 37 employees even after we've implemented this plan. And that was a big factor in us moving forward. But before we made our decision, the financial analysis, when we looked at the examination, and as I said, we were trying to reduce peak load. And as we discovered going through this analysis, our investment actually provides us a return, and as any investment should. By investing in energy efficiency, it actually brings money back to the cooperative by lowering our overall cost of power, and that benefits every other member. But there's an actual financial return to us for the investments that we're making. Using a standardized plan, though, was a much easier decision for us because the staff and actually the cost of having to design legal forms and contracts to work with various vendors was going to be quite an undertaking. And I definitely encourage you to look at that before you make a decision, because there's a lot out there, and especially when you're dealing with individuals' homes, working with multiple contractors, there's a lot to it. And having had a plan that has already been done, and also it gave us confidence knowing that there was you're not out here on your own doing this. And I think when we started out in our loan program, we really had not examined a lot of the other loan programs that were available out there. We were kind of working on an island and developing some of this on our own. But as we moved to larger investments, which we wanted to do because we knew individual members would get those savings, and that we would get a return by lowering that peak load, but being able to put a pencil to it and get a number on how much of a return that is was quite encouraging. And as a result, I think in the last year we have put over $2 million into energy efficiency improvements, and we're seeing a return on those investments. The other thing I want to mention too is that We were including heating and air. I know visiting with other co-ops in Arkansas, they're a little concerned about jumping into heating and air all at once. But many are doing different things with insulation and air sealing. The flexibility of the tariff allows to do insulation and air sealing, and you don't have to take every measure, but you have the ability to do that. The parameters are the same for the return on the investment. We wanted to be able to provide the heating and air for our members just as a service. Overall, we have a very medium to low income level for our customer base. We have a lot of senior citizens, a lot of disabled. I think our average income for our entire service area is just under $30,000 per family. And so there are a lot of challenges, and this was a big opportunity for them to see this implemented.
Mark, let's turn our attention to the questions of those who've joined us by finishing up the last slide in this section. Wesley, I may ask for you to tap that forward. There you go. The utility manager's decision tool walks through elements of a standard implementation plan that will support a utility manager. And in this case, the standard plan that was discussed in that particular document was the plan associated with the pay-as-you-save program design. But there are other vendors that have other program designs that people can go and speak with. And when you do, the utility managers invariably want to check their blind spots on, is this a type of program that's been approved by other commissions? Do I need to license anything? What are the terms of the license? Here you see it's listed as the license terms of pay-as-you-save, but other program designs are not free. What are the terms of accessing program design? Do I need any attendant accessories or IT capabilities? Do I need to offer training to my local workforce to make sure everybody's oriented to the investment program? And are there any other aspects of customer service surveys or satisfaction surveys that we would want to adapt in order to make sure that we have proper feedback from the people who are participating? That brings us to the end of the nickel tour that went on a little longer than I expected, but hopefully has satisfied those of you who wouldn't be able to read it stem to stern to know what you can find in that document that was sponsored by the Rural Business Service through a cooperative agreement specifically to reduce the costs to other utility managers who may be approaching a similar deliberative process. Wesley, I'm going to turn it back to you to moderate questions from those who have joined us, since I don't think I'm able to see the question box.
All right, thank you, Holmes. Yeah, and so we are open to questions. Folks, if you want to start typing those in down in the question box in the bottom right of your control panel. All right, first question has come in here. Is regarding a rental property. The question is, they own a rental property in a cooperative territory in Maryland, and they're not a utility staff person, but as a customer, what would y'all recommend as the initial point of contact within the utility?
I would recommend, I mean, certainly starting with the Member Services Department. They deal with these members every day. They're familiar with the customer base and the property that's out there. And so if they were going to talk to their utility, if it was a cooperative, they're going to have a Member Services Department that deals with customer inquiries. Those inquiries can range from, gosh, they've got trees coming too close to their house, but the most predominant inquiry we get are, why is my bill so high? And that's also what gives us most of our leads to go out and talk to those customers about our tariff and what can be done to lower that bill. And it's really nice to have a tool that we've always given people advice, but to be able to actually implement that advice was a big step.
Mark, I'd like to compliment your response by pointing out, especially to those of you in the learning series, how much material is now available compared to when Mark Casey, as a CEO, was thinking about the decision that his utility faced. The NRECA, the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, which SMECO certainly has a membership to, has hosted the Tech Advantage Conference every year in order to make sure that utilities across the country are aware of innovations in the field, and the financing session for 3 years in a row has featured presentations on tariffed on-bill financing. The National Association has sought to bring this to the attention of its members, and the presentations that are offered in those sessions have been available for distribution afterwards. So anybody at a utility in the Membership Services Department who hears from a member and isn't familiar with the opportunity that that member is trying to raise can look to their own National Association's annual Tech Advantage Conference for materials that will help them. There are also additional materials that have been provided on the websites of Roanoke Electric and Washita Electric, where each one of those cooperatives have made YouTube videos that in 3 or 4 minutes explain what's going on. So you have now many more resources available to you to help a member services personnel get up to speed on the opportunity so that they can become effective messengers inside the cooperative to the other departments, like the energy department, the energy technology department, or the finance department, or the utilities manager and general manager that might be heading into a town hall meeting or an annual meeting where the members might show up and ask them a question point blank. The membership services team always want to be ahead of that kind of encounter. So hopefully, whoever asked this question, you'll be able to find through SIA, through this learning series, through our referrals, the materials that you could want to make an effective approach.
Another question I have for Mark. Mark, when you're talking about, part of the decision-making process within the utility obviously involves, engaging the utility board, and I imagine they have a different set of questions than you as a manager may have. What sort of preparation, for folks in the utility industry, what sort of preparation and things do they need to be prepared for and making the case to their board?
Of course, every major decision like this goes through our board. And so, educating them about the program, mitigating the risk. They don't want to be responsible for risk. But the other thing, they want to be responsible for satisfying member needs. And we've had tremendous success in lowering people's individual electric bills 20, even 30% or more. And that gives our board great satisfaction to be able to do that. And being able to do that, knowing that they're not risking other members' money, was going a long way towards getting their acceptance. Having the regulatory approval, knowing that a regulatory body also approved this program and that it had been approved in other areas of the country, helped them to have that confidence. But I think seeing this as a service to the members that actually paid a return really pushed things over the top. And they always want to be able to provide services, but there's a limit to how many services you can afford to provide. But when you can provide a service and get a return, it makes a decision pretty easy. I hope that answers the question.
Oh yeah, no, I think it does. Thank you. one of the questions I know folks come up with a lot with utilities is just, in looking across their service territory, there's a lot of different, of course, user type, customer types. And one of the things that comes up a lot for SIA is folks looking at wondering how to navigate, making opportunities available for multifamily rental properties, which I know you have some experience with as well. And also a question around a prevalent issue throughout the Southeast, of course, is looking at mobile homes. And I wonder if you have any guidance or suggestions or experiences kind of looking at, properties beyond, residential households.
We, of course, like I say, we have done quite a few of rental properties. I've yet to find a landlord that does not like our program or love it. Traditionally, they didn't make the investments in rental property that would benefit the individual electric bills, but the fact that we can have people who are paying the bills come to us to seek improvements, and when we explain the tariff to them and they get permission from the landlord, which we have to have, we're able to go ahead and go through those. And that allows us to do the rental property. The other experience we've had is we have used the tariff for our cities, our counties, all their governmental buildings. And so far we have used that to provide lighting changeouts, and we've converted all those facilities from fluorescent to LED lighting. We have a junior college that's one of our customers. We did the same thing for them. We've worked with one of our county jails, and the thing that's really nice about lighting and air conditioning, those are measured loads. You know exactly what the savings are going to be when it's running. And we also know exactly what the savings are going to be at peak times when those items are on. And that's one of the things that's been very beneficial. We have looked at mobile homes, and we have a large percentage of mobile homes. We're trying to develop some application and have started to do some mobile homes. Right now, we're requiring the people that have mobile homes to own their property. It has to be less than 10 years old, and we've been able to go there and do some improvements, which have included some new HVAC, some duct sealing. Insulation is a problem on mobile homes that we haven't been able to solve. We've looked at some products, but that hasn't been able to be implemented yet. So.
Well, I appreciate that. These are all a work in progress, and I know as leading edge things start to be developed and explored, I know you'll be right up there in the forefront. So we'll look forward to future updates on those fronts. Now there was another question here about other categories, types, scale of energy project retrofits that are more appropriate to be financed by on-bill repayments or on-bill repayment through third-party loans. So I guess the question being, are there some things that are just more appropriate for the loan model versus a tariff model?
I know from our perspective, the tariff model just gives us more security. Essentially, we were making unsecured loans. And actually, we had talked to banks about doing that before we even started doing that, and most of our banks didn't want to touch it because it was unsecured, and they ended up charging a very high interest rate, and we took on the risk on making those unsecured loans, but those were much smaller loans. As we moved to the tariff, we're averaging about $7,000 per house that we're investing in a home. Some of the lighting projects have been $400,000 to $500,000, but those have an extremely quick payback, and some of those pay back in less than 2 years, and so those are good investments. We're considering looking at some residential solar and trying to find a way to implement that model, and I think there's room in the tariff to make that happen, although there's a few changes that would need to be made. But the ability to do some things like that is certainly there.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I know that's another, the potential applications on solar is another very popular topic around this front. So we'll look for future opportunities to explore that further. So we are at currently about 2 minutes remaining. So I want to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Casey and Dr. Hummel for giving us their time today and answering everybody's questions. We'll remind everyone that we do have office hour opportunity coming up next Friday from 1 to 2 o'clock. You're welcome to call in if you didn't get your question answered today, or if you want to go more in depth on any of these issues, feel free to reach out or send your questions to me ahead of time. Also be sure to join us for our next session. We're going to be exploring program operator models. That's going to be Thursday, May 18th from 4 to 5 p.m. I just want to note that there is a change in time due to accommodate our presenters' schedule, so it's going to be a little later in the day. It will be from 4 to 5 Eastern Standard Time. Essentially, it's going to look at the 3 different options that are out there for how folks can look to manage these programs, either internally or with a third party, or some kind of cooperative support that divides the responsibilities between the parties. So be sure to join us for that one. We know that's an important issue that folks are working to tackle. And that will be the 5th part of our ongoing series. And we hope you can all join us for the remainder of them, and hope they're answering your questions efficiently. If there's anything additional you'd like to see us discuss or add on to the series, please feel free to reach out with your questions and comments, and we want to make sure that all the content we're getting you is what you need to help you in your program. So with that, hope you all have a lovely day, and thank you for joining us. Goodbye.